Hey guys, just before we get into this topic, just have to clarify something. Anytime we talk about this particular topic, there's always someone who says Japanese people don't have to learn English, the language in Japan is Japanese, and we should speak Japanese if we're in Japan, and you shouldn't say that Japanese people have to learn English. So in actual fact, in 10 years of making videos, we've never once said Japanese people should learn to speak English. What the reason this comes up in videos is that the Japanese government have been talking on and off for years about Japanese people improving their English. Most recently, about 5-6 years ago, they said, right, we've got the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, so before that we need to improve the level of English, right? And we talked about that at the time 5 or 6 years ago, and we had a bit of a chuckle about that because we knew there's no way they were going to change the English level in Japan before the Olympics came. But it's the Japanese government who talk about it all the time, and usually what triggers it is something like the Olympics, or occasionally there's some sort of international test done to gauge the level of English competency in different countries around the world, and usually Japan scores really badly, and recently there was another one of those tests done and Japan scored lower than it had the time before. And so when that happens, occasionally that brings the topic up. The government will talk about it, or it'll be talked about on television or something like that. So they're the guys that are interested. They want to improve it just so that Japanese people can communicate with the rest of the world better, and because it's better for tourism and all those sorts of things, you know. And the sad thing is that Japanese school students and university students spend a lot of time studying English. But very few people can actually use it to competently communicate. So it's sort of like saying, I study soccer. You know, what do you study? I study soccer. Oh, okay. Do you play soccer? No. You know, or I study music. Oh, what instrument do you play? I don't play an instrument. It's a little bit like that. They study English, and you can't actually use it to communicate. And it's not the people, it's not the students' fault, it's the system, the way it's taught, you know. And we've talked about this a lot, because the other reason that we make these videos is people ask us, particularly after they've seen the Japanglish videos, which are just ridiculous. I mean, Japanglish is uniquely Japan. In you know, travel Europe, you're not going to see weird English usually as weird as you see in Japan, you know, because usually the English level's much higher, where like nobody would sort of allow that to happen. They'd be going, that's not right, that's not good English. So often when people see the Japanglish videos, they'll leave a comment and say, why is the English in Japan so bad? So we've showed you some of the reasons. We've showed you the English lessons, what they call English lessons, on television, and we've showed you some other examples of English textbooks and things, and examples of why the English in Japan is so bad. And this week we went to visit our friend. Our friend owns a juku. Our Japanese friend owns a juku, which in English some people call it a cram school, which isn't really what it is. It's just a privately owned school where kids go after school in the afternoon or on weekends to go and do their homework and to get extra lessons on different things, right? So this guy has this cram school, has this juku, and it says on the window the name of the juku, and it says Juku and English School, right? And our friend, he's a nice man, but he can't speak English. He can say a few words, but when we communicate, it's all Japanese because his English just isn't competent. He can do greetings and like, how are you? And you know, you'll hear him talking to the kids and he'll say start and stop and sit down, things like that. And that's the limit of his English. He can't actually communicate in English, you know. But he has teachers that work at his cram school, and they're mostly university students who work there part-time. They come there after university in the afternoon, and they'll do lessons. They'll teach lessons for him in his school, or help kids with their homework. And so they have different ones there who are specialists at history or science or Japanese or English. So anyway, I visited him this week and I was sitting with him. He has a desk just near the entrance, And I was sitting with him at his desk, and I'm just talking about all sorts of stuff, you know, family and stuff. And then he had a lesson was about to start, so all these junior high school students and high school students were turning up. And as they were turning up, walking in the door, he'd say, you know, "Konnichiwa," and I'd say to them, "Hello." And the response varied. We did a video on this years ago and showed you the standard school response. You say hello, and they say hello, and you say, "How are you?" And they say, "I'm fine, thank you, and you?" Right? And if there's 2 or 3 of them together, they'll all say it together in unison. "I'm fine, thank you, and you?" And really robotic, you know, because that's what they're taught at school. And they all say it together at school. You know, nobody actually has a conversation with them. It's just this repeating this robotic thing, you know. And so as the kids walked in the door, and most of them were coming for this English lesson that was being held by this university student. And so as they were coming through the door, he was saying, and I was saying to them, "Hello." And if they answered, now some of them just didn't answer, even to hello. I'd say hello, and some of them just put their head down, put their slippers on, they take their shoes off, they put their slippers on, and they just put their head down and walk past, and just wouldn't answer. And then some others would do the robotic, "I'm fine, thank you, and you?" And then others would, there were a couple who gave sort of normal, natural answers, you know, "How are you?" "Oh, good, thank you," or "I'm tired," or "I'm hungry," or something like that. But generally, probably close to half, maybe 40% of them didn't answer at all to the hello. Didn't even say hello. When I said hello, it was, they freaked out and put their head down and just walked past. And then there was probably another 40% or 50% who said hello, and then if I said, "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you, and you?" Right? That was another 50%. And then maybe 5 to 10% of them actually gave a natural answer where they sort of said, "Oh, I'm good." And then I said, "How's your holidays?" Because they just finished summer holidays, and maybe only one of them could answer that question. How were your holidays? You know, which is it just illustrating exactly how low the English level is. Because, you know, if we went to Europe and talked to a bunch of high schoolers there, you know, that sort of English would be just too easy, wouldn't it? So anyway, that was sort of an illustration of what we already know about the English levels. And then, but what really stood out and what was really tragic and what explains why it's so bad is that the English class started in there, and it was just, there was an open door and there was a classroom in there. And I could hear the guy talking, and the same thing, this terrible katakana English. And this guy who would have been probably about 20, the teacher, is a university student. And you know, they walk in and sit down, and then okay, and he says lots of okay, let's start, but then when he had to explain anything, the English, same as with Japanglish, the English is really just decoration. So the only English he was using to them was either sit down or just really sort of not important stuff, like, you know, okay, let's start, and stuff like that. Truck going through the red light then. So yeah, and then when he did his explanations, his setsume, his explanations of stuff, it was all in Japanese, you know. And then he started, and I was talking to my friend, so I wasn't really paying much attention, just when he'd say this katakana English, it was really, you know, from an English teacher, it was really like, oh no, you know, what's he doing? And then he started this copying thing, and he'd say something, and then they'd all say together something, and then he'd say something, and they'd all say something, and it was going on, and I was listening to it, and I couldn't understand any of it. And I said to my friend, "Is that English?" Right? "Is that English?" And he said, "Yeah, it's Japanese and English." So the guy was saying the Japanese first, and then, you know, hajime, start, and then all the guys, hajime, start, So a couple of things that stood out. One was that it's all this repetition, everyone saying it together thing. And then the other thing was that the pronunciation was all katakana pronunciation, right? So instead of start, it's sutato. And when you put katakana pronunciation on English, it's virtually impossible to understand. But those of us who live here hear it all the time. We sort of get used to it. But in this repetitive way that he was doing it, it was impossible to recognize any of it, the English or the Japanese. It was just this weird sounding, and then they're all repeating it. I was like, what? And I said to my friend, is that pronunciation practice? And he said, yes. So it was supposed to be teaching the kids pronunciation, you know, and just terrible. It was really cringy. It was really cringy, and I was trying not to make my friend feel bad and trying to be cool about it, but it was really cringy. Like, you got to be joking, you know? You've got to be joking. Then at the end, I was talking to a friend for a long time, and at the end, some other teachers were coming in, and he was saying to me, oh, you know, that's so-and-so's son, and she teaches, oh, so-and-so sensei, she teaches, you know, kanji, and so-and-so sensei, she teaches this, and he teaches that. And these guys that taught English, and so they had other teachers who were teaching English too, and they'd either help the kids with their English homework, or they'd have classes like this Sutato guy had. And I was saying to these English teachers, how are you? And some of them were just giggling. You know, they're 20 years old, they're supposed to be English teachers, and they'd come in, I'd say, oh, hello. And you know, the other ones I'd get konbanwa, and then he'd say, she's an English teacher. Oh, hello, how are you? Oh, and they'd giggle and wave their hand like in front of their face and walk away. And a couple of them stopped and talked. There was one who stopped and talked, and I think she might have spent some time in another country because her English was quite natural, and it wasn't real good, but it was more natural and more competent, and she was okay. But the rest of them were terrible. They either did the same as the kids. The teachers and the kids were the same. The teachers either didn't answer when I said, hello, how are you? And or they'd say, I'm fine, thank you, and you. You know, and it was just really cringy. It was just really cringy. So after leaving that Juku and sort of driving home and sitting in the car just thinking about it, it was like, you know, it's so clear. When you see things like that and hear things like that, it's so clear why the English level here is so incompetent. You know, because it's just, they don't practice it to use it for communication. It's all about just trying to memorize it all, and you know, they teach it like they teach chemistry or something, I don't know, and they just try and memorize it. They don't use it for communication. No one was communicating in English. Nobody was, the teachers, the students, nobody was communicating in English. It was just, the only speaking that was being done was that copying thing, and it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. It was just copying the sounds. Hajimeru, start. Yameru, stop. Just copying the sounds with no meaning, no context, no nothing. You know, really cringy. Really, really cringy. So you know, those of you who watch the Japanglish videos and say, why is it that the system's so bad? Why is it the English is so bad? This is why. And it's not the students or the teachers really, because they're all intelligent, hard-working, hard-studying people. I mean, that's the saddest thing. The amount of time that the Japanese students put into studying, you know, it's way more than anyone else. It's ridiculous. We've talked about that before. The amount of time that Japanese people spend studying is huge, you know, and they're all intelligent people. So there's no reason that they can't be competent in English, but it's the system. It's the way it's taught. It's the system. And those teachers are the same. They were taught English in the same way. They've never been taught to communicate in English either. So even though they're teaching English, they don't have the ability to communicate in English either, most of them. There was one young lady there who could. You know, she was reasonably competent, but even then her pronunciation was terrible. And that's usually the case. Is because no one's ever taught pronunciation. You know, the teachers who teach English aren't capable of teaching pronunciation. And the way it's taught in the big groups like that, you know, it's just not possible. It's just not possible to listen to everybody's, and they disguise each other's mistakes because they're all answering together. I'm fine, thank you, and you? You know, you can't tell whose pronunciation is the worst when they're all answering together like that, you know. Thank you, I'm fine, thank you, and you? No TH in Japanese, so usually when it's a TH word you get the S, you know. Sorry guys, this is a really bad piece of road, really noisy. So there it was. Had to tell you guys about it because just driving away thinking, yeah, that was terrible, you know. And the parents who are sending those kids, because that guy, our friend, and again, he's a good guy, you know, and he's just doing what the Japanese way of doing things, you know, and he would have told the parents who are paying for those lessons. I mean, parents, that's the other thing. Not only are those kids coming there at 6 o'clock at night, you know, to have their English lesson, which is a total waste of time, but the parents are also paying for that English lesson that's a total waste of time, you know, and he'd be telling the parents, oh, we've got this. I heard him say, this guy's the English specialisto, right? The English specialisto. So he's the English specialist, this teacher that was doing the Hajimeru Sutato. He's the English specialist. And he'd be telling the parents that, you know, when the parents come into Juku to sign up their kids, you know, he does the big sales pitch to them for about an hour. They sit there and have the big setsume, the big explanation about the lessons. And he tells the parents that this guy's the English specialist and that, you know, he teaches the English and he's the English specialist. Because relative to our friend who owns the place, his English is pretty well non-existent, you know, it's like junior high school level. And so compared to him, he thinks this guy's really amazing. He's the English specialist. So when this guy's standing there doing his Hajimeru Sutato thing, he thinks it's all very good because he thinks this guy knows what he's doing, and he just doesn't. It just doesn't. I mean, it's probably doing more harm than good. It probably is doing more harm than good, and that's a sad thing here too. You get is sometimes you get people whose English vocabulary probably isn't so bad. It's not too bad, but because of the katakana pronunciation, often it's really hard to understand them. We sort of have, you guys who live in Japan, have lived in Japan for a while, would probably agree that you sort of get used to the katakana pronunciation and you can understand it. Those of you who've seen the flying videos where we're talking to air traffic control, the air traffic controllers speak English with katakana pronunciation. And you sort of get used to it. You hear it all the time and you get used to it. But the problem is when someone comes here from another country, or when Japanese people travel and talk to foreigners, that quite often that's the problem. And we get that here. We'll have someone come from Australia to visit us, and they'll be talking to someone who can speak a bit of English here, but the pronunciation is so heavy with the katakana that our friends from Australia can't understand what they're saying. And I'm sorry, what's she saying? Because they just can't get it because of the katakana. You know, sutato, sutopu, you know, thank you very much. You know, you hear it on TV. They use the English on TV to be cool, you know, as decoration again. And quite often that's the sort of the thank you very much. There's a guy on TV that says that all the time, and everyone laughs. Thank you very much. You know, it's decoration. It's fun. You know, that's what those English teachers were actually laughing. They'd come in, I'd say, oh, come on, and he'd say, the owner of the Juku would say to the teacher, I'd say to me, oh, she's an English teacher. And I'd say, oh, really? Oh, how are you? Pleased to meet you. You know, how are you? And ha, giggle, wave their hand in front of their face, hazakashi, and walk away. That's the English teacher. So, dear oh dear. So again, we don't care. It doesn't affect us, but this is the answer to the question. Those people who say, you know, how come the Japanglish is so bad in Japan? What's going on with that? You know, don't they know that it's so bad? No, they don't, most of them. Most of them have no idea. And they'll have their Japanglish t-shirt on, and you say, oh, that's pretty interesting English. And you try and tell them why it's interesting, and they don't get it. And they're, oh, you know. So, again, not meaning to be disrespectful, again, it's not the student's problem, it's not the teacher's problem, it's just the system. And the Japanese government regularly talk about, let's improve the quality of the English, yes, let's do that. And they have meetings about it and they talk about it. And they don't change anything. They don't change anything about the system at all, about how it's taught and about how it's seen and about how the whole thing. They don't change anything. So, of course, you don't change anything. The result doesn't change either, does it? So, you know, that's the problem. It's the system. And because the old guys who run the place, who make all the decisions, they can't speak English, you know, or any second language, most of them. So they've got no idea. They've got no idea. And that's the problem. The decision makers, even our friend at the Juku, he can't speak English well, so he doesn't know how bad that lesson is. He's got no idea. He thinks it's okay. He's taken money from the parents for that English, and he thinks it's okay, and it just isn't, is it? You know, but they don't know, and that's the thing. All the guys that run the place have no idea about how to learn a language. You know, they think that, you know, that's the system. We don't change anything, but we just hope that it'll get better, and of course it won't, will it? It's actually getting worse. When they do the tests, they find that the competency level in Japan is actually dropping. So it's not working. So anyway, there it is. Again, we don't care, just to clarify, we don't care whether people speak English or not. It's Japan. It's Japan, the language is Japanese. That's cool. But this explains why. Why we can find Japanglish for you every day, easily. Yay, that's a good thing. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.